we can just get right into it too. I mean, I think we're at this time now where you have things like, AI and quantum reaching these levels where they're not research anymore. They're applied. And
Yep.
I think that's a good question that sort of could, I think, segue into, I don't know, tell me a little bit about Microsoft Research and what you're doing.
Yep.
And how things are changing in this crazy time.
Yeah, I mean, starting with AI, there is a sense in which the purpose of research is to put itself out of business. Yeah, and that happens really for real. I remember when GPT-4 came out, it was a secret project. It was Da Vinci 3, and OpenAI was working very closely with us. And as researchers in Microsoft Research started to realize what was happening, if you're a researcher that was spending your whole career working on machine reading or language translation or causal reasoning, it's disruptive to wake up one day and realize it's solved. And, that's,
right.
So from the individual level, there's a psychology there that is simultaneously thrilling and really tough to deal with. And then for Microsoft Research, right now, this idea that was just pure research, laboratory stuff, maybe we would have, 20 people in Microsoft Research spending full time on, reinforcement learning techniques for pre-training. Yeah. And now Microsoft might have 1,000 engineers hacking on this stuff. And the other companies, Google, Amazon, Baidu, you name it, will have thousands of their own. So that transition out of research into like full scale kind of infrastructure and basic technology deployment, it's thrilling. It's a point of pride, but you also have moments where you feel, wow, okay, I guess our time is coming to an end and we have to move on to new types of research vistas.
What happens to those people, if they're researching, RL at Microsoft Research, and all of a sudden you need 1,000 of those people? Do they then go over to the other side and run a team, and then you sort of find new researchers, or do they find something else? How does that work?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the individual. For sure, a lot of, if you just think about Microsoft Research, for sure, the migration of people out of Microsoft Research into very important positions in the engineering and product organizations within Microsoft, that happens to a lot of people, and some of those people become, extremely important, not only for Microsoft but in the industry. And the career growth potential is very, very significant there. Others who just really want to stay as researchers, you move on to new vistas. There are, in my career, a small number of people who have a harder time letting go. Because what happens is, I'm assuming you have a mobile phone in your pocket. Because
yes, sitting on the desk, but
right. I mean, and if you didn't, like if you had left it at, somewhere else in your car or something, you'd probably be feeling kind of crummy right now.
Yes.
And that's because that mobile phone has some technologies that you now depend on all day, every day. And there are, by my count, 6 of those that came out of fundamental research. There's more, but there's 6 really important ones that came out of fundamental research that you depend on all day, every day. Like there's a GPU in there that does 3D computer graphics and, and AI computations. And if you're without that GPU for even a minute in your day, you get a twinge of anxiety or worse, right? So there's a bunch of those. So AI is in that transition right now. That doesn't mean that GPU, from a research perspective, is the best it can be. There were better ideas in the late 1980s on how to do 3D computer graphics. But at some point, industry takes over. It bakes into the infrastructure of daily life. And yes, there can be better ideas, but the world has moved on because it's solved good enough. And not every researcher can let go of that. That software-defined frequency hopping network radio, on your desk.
Yeah.
That's another example. We know how to do it better from a research perspective, but Qualcomm, Broadcom, Apple, they've decided this is how it goes. And
it's like the people who are still obsessed with Betamax, because it's better quality video or something.
But the vast majority of great researchers either move on and become extremely important players in advancing the deployment of these things for everybody, or move on to new research areas.
And you've talked about this thing called Pasteur's quadrant, right? Which is finding that sweet spot of research that actually solves a problem.
Yeah.
Is that something you think good researchers? I mean, at least at Microsoft Research, obviously, some people are in academia need to be doing totally blue sky stuff that may have no application. But is that sort of is that a rule that you live by? Maybe you could sort of explain that philosophy.
Yeah, I actually I think I've even publicly spoken against Pasteur's quadrant.
Oh, you've spoken against it. Okay.
Yeah,
and I know you've talked
is,
about it, but
Pasteur's quadrant, it made sense for physics and chemistry because in physics, for example, there's a difference. One of the dimensions on Pasteur's quadrant is basic research to applied research. There's a distinction in physics between those two ideas. And I just don't believe that for computer science research. There's almost nothing that's purely theoretical or purely applied. It's all sort of jumbled together. Anything you can dream of, anything you could kind of work on that involves computation it does have a mathematical component to it, maybe even philosophical component, but also something that it's in your pocket. It's on your desktop or in your car or whatever. So, I do have a different quadrant diagram where, there are modes of research where we see a problem. We need to solve that problem, and it's a hard problem to solve, and we can go after it, versus just trying to push the frontiers of human knowledge, and do things in an open-ended way. That's one dimension. And then the other dimension has to do with timescales. Are we operating on a schedule? We want to see if we can do something based on the understanding of the world today, or that has to meet a certain deadline. Or is this something that we're just doing forever? Maybe it's continuous improvement of something. Just get better and better and better. Like, I don't know, medical diagnosis would be an example of that. We will never stop trying to do it that better. And so those are the dimensions that I think make more sense when you're in the computing realm. And so if you look at those four quadrants, there's one quadrant which is known timescale, known problem.
Okay.
But I call that the responsive quadrant because we've got to solve serious problems now. There's another quadrant which is no schedule but known problem. That's continuous improvement. I call that the sustaining quadrant. There's totally open-ended, no schedule. That's a blue sky quadrant. Just thinking big, deep thoughts, trying to push frontiers of knowledge. And then the short-term scheduled, open-ended is the invention quadrant. Are there new human experiences? Are there new technologies that would be surprising or open up new possibilities? And so for my job and the job of everyone in Microsoft Research, I feel the pressure every week to deliver impact across all four of those quadrants. And internally, I define a home run, a research home run, as something that somehow hits all four quadrants at once. Can we do that? And, if you think of generative AI, the seeds of generative AI, that's an example of a home run. It hits all four of those things at the same time. They're super rare. But
Yeah.
those are the things you sort of live for. As a practical matter, I just need to show Satya Nadella that we're doing good stuff in all four quadrants, and doing that on a routine
Right.
basis. And we do pretty well. I mean, we have ups and downs like any place, but overall,
Right.
pretty proud of
Right.
what we do.
I always thought of generative AI though as like it's not like one thing. It's like many different breakthroughs in computer science that have sort of, combined over many years, right? And some of those maybe
Yeah,
from all different quadrants, right? I
yeah.
mean,
It's
yeah,
really a surprising thing. When the ideas of attention in transformers came up, there's a famous paper out of Google research on this.
yeah,
I didn't think that much of it. And then the folks at the Allen Institute for AI a year later in 2018 had this language model called Elmo with what I thought was an astronomically large number of parameters. I think it was 93 million parameters, which,
right. Tiny bytes a day
freshmen in
stuff.
college do that after dinner nowadays. But, at that
Right.
time, it was just astronomically large. And it seemed to understand how to stitch words together into coherent sentences. And I was just shocked. And that was the first insight that, oh my God, there is something that happens with scale. I didn't have the word emergence in my mind then,
Right.
but it
Right.
was like the first inklings, at least for me, of emergence. And it, and of course, less than a year later, OpenAI had switched to that architecture, and the rest is
Yeah.
history, I guess.
And it's hard to talk about AI today without sort of, I don't know, it intersects with geopolitics. And I wanted to ask you, you did a stint at DARPA famously. You did a couple of famous projects. One of them was this red balloon project where there were these 10 weather balloons around the world and no one knew where they were. And it was almost like how fast can the internet, find these things? And it really showed the Department of Defense. It was like 9 hours or something, right? It showed them the power of social media, the way the internet could be used. What do you think they should be thinking about today?
Yeah. Well, the easy answer which is too easy, is they should be thinking about AI, which they are.
I'm sure they are. Yeah, right. We know they are. Yeah.
That red balloon challenge was it was a mini protest by me because, I started DARPA and I have my first presentation in front of this joint command that determines resource allocation across different parts of the military. And, and so I explained what I was going to focus on. One of the topics that was top of my mind at that time, it was early 2009, was social networks and network effects. And man, I took a beating. These grizzled, old, not old, they weren't that old, but, very experienced military leaders just didn't believe it at all. It was all fluff, all this social science, computational social science stuff. And so I left that meeting with my tail tucked between my legs, and I talked to the DARPA director and, Regina Dugan. She said, well, you should try to prove the point. And that's where that experiment and several other things happened. That summer of 2009, there was the Iranian Twitter revolution. So talking about geopolitics,
Yeah.
and, where all of a sudden, a country that had internet traffic going in and out that rivaled any U.S. state suddenly dropped to zero. And
Yeah.
at the same time, the group at the Stanford Research Institute was spinning out a company called Siri.
Yeah.
And so the questions about, will we have intelligent agents that are meaningful participants in political discourse? Will machines and people on the internet assemble, protest, influence? All of those questions were being asked there. And the prevailing attitude, certainly by military leaders, was this is all a bunch of social science fluff.
Mm.
So now zoom ahead to where we are today. It's all real. And so I think that part of the purpose of research, and we try to do this in Microsoft research, is to try to look into those implausible futures that we think are inevitable.
Yeah.
And if you can identify those, then you have to really open up the conversation about it. And the consistent pattern, if you're doing it right, is that people think you're wasting time.
Right. So
But
what
this
do they
combination
think
of
you're wasting?
implausibility with inevitability, that combination, if you can land on one of those, it's really hard. If you can land on those, then you have a very good chance of really having something.
What's the wasting time today? You know, what's the equivalent of that? Is it
Well, the way I look at it is, if you're doing disruption right, you can't win.
Mm.
So put yourself in a company like Microsoft. If you are successful at creating an internal disruption, that actually harms our business. That's
Okay.
point of
Yeah.
disruption. On the other hand, if
Right.
you don't do it and a competitor does it, you'll get blamed for missing it.
Yeah.
And so the whole disruption game, which is really one of the cores of what an organization like Microsoft Research is supposed to do, in that respect, you can't win. In fact, this is something I preach to my leadership team all the time, that if we're doing it right, it should feel like
Yeah.
we can't win. And
That's
that
fascinating.
is, of course, I'm being a little over dramatic with that. But the point here is
Right.
to make sure that we're kind of confronting, that kind of reality, with
Hmm.
some courage and some conviction. Because otherwise, if you put yourself in my shoes, it would be very easy. The company's being very successful right now, so it'd be very easy to just slide into just following the lead of our product teams and business leaders and just helping them doing what they're doing. That would be an easy thing for people to do. Or,
Yeah.
to be completely off in outer space and just thinking beautiful thoughts that aren't connected to reality at all. Those are psychologically, the easier paths for us. But neither of those are good enough. And we have a CEO that's smart enough also to understand that, to the point that I think if Satya Nadella or Kevin Scott thought we were doing that, they would probably cancel us completely. And so, we really have to think in these ways. But it's a weird thing. Whenever we're most successful, those are also the most difficult times, because it ends up really challenging mindsets and cultures across the company.
Yeah. And it does seem like we're in one of those times now. I mean, this has been a very disruptive time, I think, for all the big tech companies. So,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I think I think of it as the collaboration with OpenAI took shape, and the company, I think, very courageously made the decision to just go all in on it. That's been deeply disruptive to everybody. I
Yeah.
think all the cards have been thrown up in the air, and the game is new, and that touches everyone from the most fundamental researchers in MSR to the people out there,
Yeah.
selling.
It's really actually interesting. I don't know if you look at history, I mean, there's a lot of examples of companies that have developed really disruptive technology and not really capitalized on it, right? Like there's Bell Labs, there's Xerox PARC, right? There's all these examples, and they sort of just other companies kind of took those things and ran with it. But this is like a new era, it seems, where these big supposedly slow behemoth tech companies are actually able to say, no, we need to actually disrupt ourselves and take this seriously. I mean, do you agree with that, or do you think I'm sort of, I don't know, am I looking at it the wrong way?
Well, I hope you're right. I have no idea. I have this, it's probably a silly analogy. I ask people to imagine that we are in an alternate universe that just is a modern universe, but people don't have electricity in their homes. Maybe they use candles for light or, fireplaces for heat. But, someone discovers and invents copper wire and figures out that it can carry electric current efficiently over long distances. And we just know this is going to change life for the better. So the Microsoft in that universe starts building copper wire like crazy and stringing it into every city, down every street, into every home, because we just know that it's going to be a benefit to everyone, and we just know that whoever can deploy the most infrastructure has a very good chance of being a winning business. But we're not quite sure how and why, because no one has yet invented the light bulb. And so we're in this situation now. Microsoft, of course, has tons of AI products that people are finding really useful, and we're actually making very good money with it. That's great. But no one in Microsoft, and certainly no one in Microsoft Research, is confused about whether the ultimate applications and tools that are AI powered, the things that you really can't live without all day, every day, just like the things in your mobile phone. I don't think anyone's confused about whether we're there yet. And
Right.
Again, from a research perspective, when the transistor was invented in 1946, and there was a Nobel Prize, out of Bell Labs for that, the first application of the transistor was a tone generator to do telephone switching. And that made very, very good money for Bell Labs.
Yeah.
But no one was thinking about a digital computer made with this stuff. In fact, the second commercial application was an AM transistor radio, which also made good money.
Right.
So there's nothing wrong with selling tone generators and AM transistor radios. They do a lot of good. Consumers benefit. Companies make money. That's all great. But I think what we're really wondering is, what is the analog to the scalable digital computer? The thing that will really just revolutionize and transform every walk of life, every industry. And, if I think of like the home run I would love Microsoft Research to be known for, is to plant the seeds for that kind of thing.
Do you think that's a new, I mean, that essentially is like breakthroughs in AI? Would that be within AI? Like figuring out ways to, I don't know, like some sort of world model, breakthrough or something along those lines?
World models, so, agents and action models are really, really exciting, intense topics right now. Agents are particularly interesting right now because, the rapid transition from research into different types of production and deployments is really incredible. And there's very, very surprising uplifts in capability with these agent-based systems. It's really incredible. The colleagues in Mustafa's Microsoft AI team, Mustafa Suleiman's team, these are colleagues like Dominic King and Harsha Nori and so on. They worked with us in MSR, and they developed this multi-agent-based healthcare diagnostic orchestrator, DXO, diagnostic orchestrator, and it's a virtual panel of 6 large language models, even from like all different suppliers, not just OpenAI, and not just Mustafa's own team. And it's shocking how that thing is like 4.5 times better than a panel of human doctors at solving rare disease diagnostic cases by working together, as opposed to
4.5 times better.
Right. Which is just kind of very, very surprising. And of course, that has the whole tech industry, that effect we're seeing over and over again, has the tech industry pretty excited. But, this was just a year ago, fundamental research in our labs.
Right.
And now it's like a primary industry talking point, which
Yeah.
is, again, just mind blowing. And I think action models, are going to be that way soon. Closing the loop
Yeah.
where, you know, the AI, you know, orders some action, some change in the world, changes the steering wheel if it's a car, or a robot hand if it's a robot, or moves the mouse and clicks on something on your Windows desktop, those types of things, and then observing the change and then continuing that cycle in a productive way. I think that's going to pop as a very big thing. I mean, I don't know if I guess we should have talked about this earlier, but today Microsoft Research is releasing a small language model called Farah, and Farah is
Yeah.
an action model for Windows that does that. And these action models, I think, now you start to think, okay, action models plus agents, what will that be able to do?
Yeah. Well, tell us a different. I mean, that's really interesting. And I know Microsoft Research has done a ton of stuff on small models, and made these things really efficient, which has been really interesting. But help us understand like the difference between an action model versus an agent versus, a traditional LLM, so to speak.
Right. So, I think for agents, for us are AI models that have the ability to have a defined role and interact with other AI models and human beings. And so in a kind of collaborative setting. And for that reason, there's also a proactive nature to these things. In other words, two AI models interacting in an agent setup essentially prompt each other without any human in the loop necessary. And, in the healthcare orchestrator that Mustafa's team developed, it's really interesting, the architecture of these things. There's one agent that I call the curmudgeon. It sort of just disagrees with everything, wants more proof, and so on. And it's just incredible to watch in the chain of debate that happens in these systems, how that sort of just drives better results, lower hallucination rates, and so on.
Yeah.
When we get to action models, there's an overlap here, but an action model actually causes or can order some change in the world. Sometimes it's a physical change. Like, it's easiest to think of this with a self-driving car. It can cause a change in the accelerator, brake, and steering inputs, and then observes in the next time step the result of that change. And that observation is the prompt for the next cycle.
Got it. Okay.
And so in the FARA system, that's happening on your Windows desktop. These things overlap. We also just at Ignite last week, Microsoft Research with Jay Parik's team released something called Agent Instruct, which is a multi-agent system to take a modest amount of your private data, let's say in your company for some task, and then generate very large amounts of highly accurate synthetic data. And so these multi-agent systems aren't just for better interactions, better problem solving, but even for things like generating synthetic data. And
then the company would then use that
for training models, for doing pre-training, which is pretty, at least within Microsoft Research, has been incredibly, and our products in Microsoft has been incredibly useful. And we suspect, a lot of others out in the world will get good use out of it too.
And I guess that the point of the action models is you're essentially making them, the benefit of that would be they're more reliable in their agentic capability, right? Because they're
but also being able to change things in the world. Now a change like clicking on a link on the web browser maybe doesn't seem like a big deal, but what about sending an email on your behalf? What about deleting files to clean things up? How far do you want it to go? And again, maybe it's easier to think about it in a robot, a change in the world to tell the
Right.
robot's hand to move to a certain thing and grab something is a more obvious kind of change. But that entitlement for AI to be able to make actual changes in the world, I think is the kind of fundamental motivator behind an
Yeah.
action model.
I mean, I sort of I feel like I can. I mean, there's computer use models and things like that. I mean, I can have these models change things. I
Yeah.
just don't necessarily trust them to do the really important things yet. So for me, it's like a
Yes.
question of, so is the next breakthrough actually sort of reliability, right? Or some
Yeah.
kind of,
Yeah.
mixture between the non-determinism and the determinism
Yeah.
or
With the
something.
FARA model that we've released today, the H.A. Kamar, who led the team in MSR, she leads our AI Frontiers group. She was telling me about in the early testing, one thing that the AI wanted to do was to go into an account. I don't know if it's an open table account or something, to go make. It had figured out that what the user wanted was to make a dinner reservation or something somewhere. So it goes to it launches the open table application, tries to log in and realizes it doesn't know HA's password. And so it intelligently decides, well, that's okay. I can click on the I forgot my password thing, change the password, and then go ahead and make the dinner reservation, which it did.
Wow.
Of course, that creates the problem that HA then no longer knows what the password is. Um,
Right.
and
Right.
so it's those sorts of things, that we're able to start to understand. And it really ends up having to do with just understanding, what is the context of the user and the user's intent, and what are the right boundaries for these things. And,
Yeah.
it's incredibly, it's hard to convey just how incredibly fascinating all of that is. And
And I know you talk a lot about healthcare, a lot about science. I have a couple questions on that, but I want to just, in the interest of time, talk about quantum a little bit,
yes,
because when it comes to science, drug discovery, which you've done, I think a handful of papers that I know about that touch on this. It seems like the problem is we don't have enough data, or the right kind of
yeah,
data, like we do with language. We know all these fragments of words, right? Almost every possible combination of words.
hmm
We don't know that for the physical world. We haven't
right,
mapped out every atom. Um, so that, and Microsoft is the one of two companies, I think, that's gone on to the final stage of the DARPA, you know
yep,
I guess, program that looks at all these quantum
yes.
ideas. So tell me, I just love to know your thoughts on, is quantum, do you think that sort of, that could be maybe this thing that really, that people aren't thinking as much about now? Obviously it's hyped in your world, but like, I think in the general world people aren't really thinking about it. Like, how do you think about quantum?
So
Is it
there's hype, but it's for us in Microsoft Research, it's dead serious. Our AI for science effort has been largely directed towards training foundation models that, as we put it, learn the languages of nature. So if you think about, let's say, the dynamics of a protein, um, there's structure there. There's functionality in the dynamics of a protein or an ensemble of two proteins when they are trying to dock to each other. And one thing that we do is we run old-fashioned Fortran codes that simulate those things. They're very precise Fortran codes. We've had them for decades. We know they are very, very precise, but they're impractically slow. Like, to get a relevant protein to fold, you might have to run it for a few million years on thousands of servers on Azure. And so that's not good. But it does turn out that at every time step, the output that comes out of the simulators is beautifully perfect training data for a generative model. And what we're finding over and over again is that those generative models run anywhere from 100,000 times to 10 million times faster than those Fortran codes. And they maintain the chemical accuracy. So now, can we get our hands on internet scale data like that? That's the
Yeah.
question. And so the one program that we already have to run on a quantum computer is to do that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so we want to get our hands on a quantum machine that can run that quantum code. And I think that, that is the need. And I'm telling you, if we can run that code, stuff will change really rapidly. Lots of things, will just in molecules for materials and chemicals and proteins, things like drug discovery. How about enzymes to, I don't know, make your vegan food taste better?
Yeah.
New nanoparticles for better lubricants to dramatically improve the efficiency of machines and lower energy requirements. How about carbon capture molecules, take carbon out of the atmosphere? Just so much stuff. And that's all highfalutin, but even just basic stuff like, I don't know, you know, better makeup,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
stuff. So all of that is important. So the Majorana effort, um, is what's exciting is that the current 4-qubit system is actually demonstrating real quantum computation. So that's incredibly interesting because the architecture of Majorana 1 is expandable to up to 1 million logical qubits. Actually, for what I've described, we only need a few hundred. And so there's a lot of optimism. Now, the thing about quantum is our quantum program, what's remarkable is over more than 15 years, it has not deviated from the engineering plan. Every step of the way has come true, which is remarkable for something that's been going this long. The big gotcha is that every step has taken longer than we expected.
Mm-hmm.
So far, the physics and engineering have all turned out to be correct, and so we're on a very confident path. But how long will it take? That's the big question.
I read that you were, as a kid, one of the reasons you got into computer science, you were sort of inspired by, the space program, the moon, the Apollo mission. Do you think that there's I don't know, like an opportunity here? I think as a, sort of a public-private partnership. I don't know. Is there a moonshot around quantum that maybe the U.S. can and should do, or is there something else? I don't know. Is there another literal, or I don't know, moonshot that we should be thinking about?
Well, I think that's a great question for Jason Zander, because Jason not only has supervision of the quantum program, but he's also our primary Microsoft interface to our government programs.
Hmm.
And for that reason, Jason himself has sort of combined things, and that's why we've provided DARPA with complete visibility in every detail of what we're doing. And that's also been a sanity check, I think, for our leadership, people like Satya Nadella, because it's reassuring to see DARPA assess our program as one of only 2 that could achieve scalability. And so, I think, you're asking a policy question now. Should maybe the government bet on our program, the other program, and maybe 1 or 2 others to really have a moonshot effort?
Yeah.
I wouldn't be against that. My own motives are very focused and selfish. I want that biomolecular simulator.
Yeah. Yeah.
Give me that. And because at least in MSR's AI for Science laboratory, we are supremely confident if someone can give us that, that there would be a large number of very, very substantial breakthroughs.
I mean, that alone. I mean, just just that one exam, or one of those examples, maybe except for the makeup one, would be to me would be sort of worth it, right? Maybe that's just my bias because I don't wear makeup, but um, it just seems
Yeah,
like
it would save the planet. Take carbon out of the atmosphere,
right.
new solid state battery technologies, much, much more efficient machines. So many, you'd have the path to very targeted drug therapies and much faster drug development. Dramatic compression of the cost of immunotherapies. So many possibilities would open up.
I mean, it would almost. I mean, because your other thing that you talk a lot about, you mentioned the panel on rare diseases and all that, but is healthcare, right? And I think in a way, quantum gets at the root of that problem in a way, but you've also talked about how AI can help in I don't know, taking doctors' notes. I'm kind of curious about that too. I mean, like Jeffrey Hinton predicted that I think by now, a few years ago, we would have gotten rid of radiologists, right? Because there was some promising research there, but and of course there's studies every day. I mean, I just saw one the other day about how computers can do just as well as you know like young physicians, right, on MRIs, but it never seems to really move the needle. Like I don't think we've seen like healthcare costs come down as a result of AI yet.
Yeah. I think in the history of, I've looked into this question. So first off, I don't know what's going to happen there. I really don't. But one thing I get asked all the time, doctors ask me all the time, will I get replaced by AI? And when you look at the history of modern medicine, as far as I can tell, there have only been 2 times when a medical specialty disappeared or human beings were removed from medical specialty. One is all the technologies around brain scans led to the field of neurology, and the whole field of phrenology disappeared. And then a whole panoply of interesting technologies, primarily around blood-based diagnostics, eliminated the need for barbers to do bloodlettings, for example, as a treatment for the flu and so on. Outside of those 2 examples, at least in modern medicine, it's very hard. In fact, I find it impossible to find examples where technologies have eliminated human beings from a medical specialty. My favorite example here is in the 1950s, there was the first suggestion to use ultrasound in obstetrics and gynecology, in OBGYN. And if you think about that, there was a lot of pushback. People were afraid of it. There was questions about whether it would damage the unborn child or the reproductive capabilities of the pregnant mother. Doctors weren't trained, so they didn't know how to read this stuff. So it took almost a decade for ultrasound to become standard of care. And there was a flip in the process where if you're a pregnant woman, you go to your OBGYN today, and your doctor says, I don't believe in that ultrasound stuff, so I'm going to put my hands on you and do manual palpation, you might run away or report that person to the authorities. So there's a real flip there. So the point is that in advanced knowledge work, we still have human beings. In fact, we need more OBGYNs, not less today. But and I'll use the Microsoft term here, the co-pilot augmentation of what that OBGYN can do today and the expectations of that doctor's patient or customer have changed really deeply. And so if I had to predict what's going to happen in healthcare with AI, I think we're going to see 100 of those kinds of things emerge over the next 5 years. And I think in less than 5 years, if you go to your doctor and you find out your doctor doesn't believe in this AI stuff, you're going to be very concerned. So it's that sort of thing. But I think by the same token, you will still have your human doctor. Now, I could be completely wrong, but Jeff Hinton, who's way smarter than me, was wrong about that. I could be wrong as well. But this is This,
And I guess the question is, does that really change the problem we have with healthcare, especially in this country, right? It's just too
right.
expensive. Premiums are too high, and then, people can't get care. Is it ultimately just we get better care, but those underlying problems are still kind of there? Do you
So,
think? I mean,
referring back again to Mustafa's team's work on this diagnostic orchestrator, one of the interesting things, if you read that paper, is the diagnostic orchestrator, when it was asked to do medical diagnosis, was given a lab budget. And the reason it was given a lab budget is otherwise the AI would just order every single lab test in the hospital in order to have the maximum amount of data because it was trying to do the best possible job.
yeah,
And the thing that was interesting is that the more money you give the AI, the better job it does. Okay, it seems like a Captain Obvious kind of thing. But
yeah,
it does beg the question, okay, so then in real life, how much is enough?
yeah,
And I think that that's not a technology question. That is a societal question, and that
right.
we have to figure that out.
I know you're out of time. Great to chat with you. I hope we get to do again sometime, and yeah, we'll
All right.
we'll leave it at that.
It was fun.
Thanks. It was fun. Thank you.